Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Needs-Led Fundraising for Sustainability, which is running as part of a series of themed events focusing on From Survival to Sustainability. I'm delighted to welcome you to the Rebuilding Heritage programme, which is funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund under their Business Support programme. I'm Sarah Murray. I'm the Project Manager on the Heritage Alliance's Rebuilding Heritage programme. A little bit of housekeeping for you before we begin. Audience members, your cameras and microphones will be switched off throughout. Please do pop your questions into the Q&A box. We'll be taking all questions at the end of the main presentation, so please do make sure to put them in the Q&A box rather than in the chat so that we don't lose them through the course of the session. The chat is switched on today, so please do say hello, interact with your fellow attendees, and let us know about any tech issues. Do make sure that you have your chat set to all panellists and attendees if you want to share with the whole group. There's a drop-down option where you type into the chat and you can change who receives your messages. Live captioning is available today, and you can turn this on via your Zoom menu. The session is being recorded and will be made available on our website afterwards. A little bit about the programme for you. Rebuilding Heritage provides training and support for the sector to help heritage professionals and heritage organisations respond to the challenges of COVID-19. We are offering free resources, such as today's session, which will be openly available online, as well as one-to-one and group support, which you can access by application. Applications for round 6, which is to receive support in September and October, are now open. Full details are available on our website at rebuildingheritage.org.uk. The application is quite short. We estimate it should take you about 30 minutes to complete, and you can express interest in just one, some, or all types of support available, including small group training and one-to-one consultancy. This is the final round of by-application support on the Rebuilding Heritage programme. The deadline for applications is 11 p.m. on Tuesday the 27th of July. Particularly relevant to today's session is our one-to-one fundraising consultancy offer. We may get questions in today that we run out of time to answer within the webinar, or your needs may be quite specific, complex, or you may need help with an application that you are working on right now. The one-to-one consultancy that you can apply for is a great opportunity to get direct and individual support from the Rebuilding Heritage programme. And as I mentioned earlier, the applications take just 30 minutes. So to get that vital one-to-one support, please get your application into us by the 27th of July at 11 p.m. Please do apply. We are keen to hear from you all. You can also follow us on Twitter at heritage_RH and using the hashtag Rebuilding Heritage. Now, on to the session itself. I'm delighted to introduce you to Jill Jolly, Director of Achieve Consultants, with over 30 years experience working in fundraising. Jill is delivering the session on behalf of our fundraising partner, the Chartered Institute of Fundraising, of which Jill is a fellow. Over to you, Jill.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. And it's absolutely great to be with you all this morning. I don't know about where you are, but it's pretty scorchio. So this is it. Hopefully you're not having to open the fridge door to keep cool. That's what my treat is going to be at the end of this session. But we've got an hour for me to share some thoughts with you, and then we're actually going to open up the questions. So I know I've seen some of you before, but this is just who I am. Obviously you'll see the small picture as well, but it's really lovely to reconnect with many of you. And you'll just see in the chat box, Judith has just connected. We've got a one-to-one session. The thing that Sarah was talking about of the range of things that are open. We're currently in round 5 at the moment, so we're currently delivering a range of things, and that's why I've got a number of sessions. In fact, I've got 3 sessions this afternoon as well with people who applied in the last round. But as Sarah said, we've got one final round. So whilst today, we're hoping to cover an awful lot of things, we've only got an hour and then half an hour for questions. So please, there's lots of things that you might not get a chance to ask or don't feel it's appropriate for a general audience. So why not sign up and ask for some fundraising support, some fundraising consultancy, as well as other things that might help your organisation to move out of this difficult time, but also to inspire you and think of things that you could be challenging, even if it's not this month or next month, in terms of the things that you yourself as an organisation can do. It's just a chance to share some thoughts, get some outside inspiration, and it may be you only set up these new things perhaps at the end of the year or the start of next year. So just to remind you, as Sarah said, the programme for round 6 is still open, and it closes next Tuesday. It's a really simple form, so make sure you complete that, and we can carry on any thoughts that we start during this session as well if you apply for one-to-one fundraising consultancy. And I'm sure lots of you are thinking about that, and it's a great way to think about your organisation, your skills and knowledge, where your gaps exist and how we can help fill those. So this is all a session about helping you to be needs-led rather than fundraising driven. So we're going to be sharing lots of thoughts about what funders are looking for, as well as lots of hints and tips that will actually make the most of your applications and increase your chances of success. As you will see, there's a number of checklists. We're trying to make this as practical as possible, so there's plenty of takeaways for you within this session, as well as any subsequent sessions that you might have one-to-one. So we'll be talking in a presentation format for an hour, and then at 11 o'clock we'll then be looking for questions to submit those, as Sarah again said, in the Q&A. But you know, submit those in a little while, then they don't get lost. But you know, as a thought occurs to you, perhaps you want to jot it down on a post-it and then put that into the Q&A. But do make the most of the chat function to connect with your fellow participants this morning. So let's get cracking then and think about moving forward with your fundraising as we come out of this difficult situation. So in order to really think about being needs-led rather than funding-driven, you really do need to stay focused. So, you know, just ask yourself, you know, this basic question: is this really the project that you want to do? Or are you just trying to invent something so it gives you a chance to actually get some funding? Now, some of you might be saying, but Jill, in real terms, that's what we do. Now, I'm going to give you plenty of hints and tips, and I'm going to encourage you to think about creativity and lateral thinking, looking at things from different angles as well. But sometimes we end up sort of drifting off, and I say, let's not just go chasing the cash. Is saying stay focused on your strategic aims of your organisation and what you actually want to achieve as an organisation overall. Because as I say, if we just chase the money, we end up, you know, with what we often refer to as mission drift. You end up with a tiny element of your work becoming the main focus of your organisation, and then you realise the reason that you established, you're just not doing that anymore. But also, you say, by becoming needs-led, is a way to help fund the organisation overall. It's a way to make sure you want to take the actual work with the people and organisations that you want to do it with. And also it's about delivering the results and achieving the things that are important and quite often vital to you. So this is where we want to avoid that square peg in the round hole scenario. But there's times when we still have got a square peg, and think of that as you know, the work that you're doing, and the round hole being a funder. And you're thinking, oh, they say they support heritage organisations, they're interested in capital, or they're interested in project work, or they're interested in running costs. And you think, but we don't quite fit. That's where you say it's not about mission drift and inventing something. But again, just sometimes look at things from different angles. So sometimes you may be yourself thinking, this is what we do, this is how we achieve it. But sometimes there are different angles that you can look at. And I'm going to give you plenty of examples of this as we move throughout. So don't worry, I'm just sort of doing a bit of scene setting as we're starting off. So think of it very much as like a pick and mix. And there's sometimes when you find a funding source that you've identified and you're a really good fit, like our lion here, you know, the top and the bottom of the cards. Oh, it's perfect. I often call those a hand in glove fit. Again, it might be like our crocodile, or is it an alligator? Not that good on exotic animals, but is that, again, it might be a perfect fit, a hand in glove. But sometimes you're so far removed, you're an octopus's head, but my goodness, you've not got 8 tentacles, you've got a parrot's tail. Sometimes you're just so far apart. And that's also where sometimes you really need to consider, is it worth making this application? Is it worth spending the time? Is it worth building up our expectations of hoping that we might just somehow manage to fit in? And sometimes the answer is no. And that is the best thing sometimes, is actually not to waste your time and be much more focused, as I said at the start, but also I'm a great believer in quality applications to quality funders where you are a very good fit. What I do when I'm actually researching funding opportunities, I like to give them a score. So again, I might be thinking of an organisation, a project that I'm working with. And so when I'm looking for funding sources to identify to be approaching, is that I then start to give them a score. So I might give 5 as hand in glove fit, 0 is absolutely way off. And then I then use, when we're starting the approaches, using the priorities, those that score a 5 to make the applications first, or the proposals, or speak to individuals if it's individuals I need to be contacting. So use that as a way to actually sort of target. And so you're looking at the organisations and individuals that you've got the most chance of success. So that means you're using your time effectively, but also that really helps with your morale as well, because there's nothing worse so many times than actually feeling, oh gosh, that's another refusal that we got. So again, that's a quick tip to actually help you with that. And also, you know, in terms of fashions, you know, over the years, you know, there's been different fashions, but, you know, some of you perhaps are thinking back, whether it's nostalgically to the era of the shoulder pads. I don't know about some of you, is that I was definitely around in the 80s and started work in the 80s. You know, that big shoulder pad look. And again, I'm sure you remember some of the characters on this particular bit of the slide. And again, over the years, you know, shoulder pads have been in. But listen, you yourself in your organisation don't need to feel you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, because you may be the person who is actually coordinating things, but you know, it is a team approach. We're about to start the Olympics, my goodness, exciting times with the official start tomorrow. You know, and this programme is totally thinking about Team GB. We are UK wide with this programme, so whether you're in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, or in England itself, anyone can apply and be part of this Rebuilding Heritage programme. But let's just focus on the analogy between the team and you know, your organisation. So just excuse us if you're in Scotland, Northern Ireland or Wales, but you know, we have just had the Euros, haven't we? So just think of Team England, you know, and this is the squad of 2021, but you know, everyone had a role to play. So yes, I'm not that into football, but yes, there was people in the forwards trying to score the goals, there was the defenders, there was the goalie, but you know, there was the manager. I think we all love Gareth Southgate, don't we? But you know, so think of yourself. Yes, you might be Gareth Southgate, but remember, you don't need the shoulder pads, because whilst you need someone to research and understand the funders, as well as lead and coordinate and write the funding bids or applications or proposals, it needs a team of people around you to help you with information, with case studies, with budgets and other key elements, such as the project information, who's going to benefit. Now you might say, well, Jill, that's me, but you might be wearing different hats. One minute you might be thinking of a service provider, project lead, running your organisation, and then there may be other times when you're swapping your hat and thinking as a fundraiser. So do remember, part of the role as well is about managing the expectations of all your stakeholders. both internal and external. So obviously when you are successful with securing funding, you need to keep your donors happy. So basically remember to say thank you, but remember to keep them updated and informed. Share with them the changes that are being made. But internally, yes, as I said before, it's about gathering up information from your colleagues, the other volunteers in your organisation, to get together information that will put together in a real solid case for support. That's a word you're not familiar with. Don't worry, I'm going to be talking a lot more about case for supports in just a few minutes' time. But you say, let them know when you've made the approach. Let them know if it's possible, when you'll know the outcome. But keep people posted so that they'll say, well, I did all that work. I shared this with my colleague. They've never said anything. So even if you're not successful, don't feel ashamed or embarrassed, but it's about being realistic and it's about managing expectations. Even if you've applied to all the funding sources and approaches that you've made, all scored a 5 because you took my advice and you graded them and you said, Jill said prioritise those that get a 5 first. And you think, oh, crikey, we've got a failure. Don't think of it a failure, you've just not got a success at this moment in time. But share that with your colleagues to say, that's the way of the world. You're not successful with every single application. But I do know that to say we've held back time to make sure with this final round, we know there's going to be quite a few applications and we're expecting there to be a much higher chance of success of securing support for whatever part of the Rebuilding Heritage programme that you apply to in this final round 6. Remember, the closing date is next Tuesday. It's 11 p.m, so you can stop up. It's not quite burn the midnight oil, but remember, next Tuesday, the 27th of July is the closing date. And we can't guarantee success, but let's just say there is a very high chance of success because we knew that there will be plenty of people who only just found out about the programme. So make sure you get your applications in, and it is a great chance. I can spend time with you one-to-one thinking about your particular organisation, your funding needs, and giving you specific advice in that way. So let's go back to thinking about being needs-led, not funding-driven. So often we end up doing what I call putting the cart before the horse. You need the horse first. You're going to find out there's lots of analogies using animals in this session that we've got together today. So often you say people find a funding pot and then try to invent something. So that's what I mean by don't put the cart before the horse, put the horse first. So three key tips to actually help you in terms of factors for success. And I think of it as the 3 R's. I know we're using that reading, writing and arithmetic type of one and bending the rules a little bit, but it's a silent W. So we need to research any funding opportunities. We need to think about where it is going to be a written application, written proposal, written bid, written submission. There's lots of different things we call it. And then it's about having a relationship where we can before we make an approach, but definitely when we've been successful, it's ensuring we have a relationship, and then report. Ensure that any specific requirements in terms of reporting are noted and fulfilled, because that's where you can get on the blacklist with funders. So make sure they don't have to chase you, because that's irritating. They've not a lot of time. They've given you money. It was the terms of their grant conditions possibly, or just basic courtesy. As I say, I always think we understand anyone who might be able to support us. We then invite them to get involved. We then thank them when they agree to support us. And then before we can do anything else, we've got to update them, because we thank initially to say, yes, we've got your money. Thank you for agreeing to support us. But, you know, it's that courtesy thing, but it's that process. We need to at least give them one update before we think about approaching them again. But also we need to keep in touch with them. So if times get tough and we're not able to do things in the way that we want to, that's what I mean about having a good relationship. But share successes as well. I don't mean contact a donor, a supporter, every 5 minutes. That can become sort of overkill. But, share with them important news, whether that's good, whether it's bad, but almost embed them into the organisation and keep them posted so they know what's going on. So when you are actually, before you start even trying to identify funding, what you need to do is do some internal research and understand the work your organisation wants to do and the need for it. And this is a really good tip. I know I shared with you before, some of you were in one of, a small number of you were in one of the training sessions that I did, when I talked about the 6 honest serving men. But to say, just think about who is going to be involved. When is it going to happen? Where will it take place? How will this work happen? Why are we doing it? And what is the difference it's going to make? So really good tip there. And so remember, we've got 5 W's and 1 H there. So what you need to do is say, before looking for funding, is have a clear picture. Say who you are, why you exist, what you actually do. But that big why, that's why it's there in orange, to make it stand out. What's the actual issue, the current situation that needs to change or improve? And what you actually achieve, the difference that you will actually make. So we're going to keep coming back to the why and the what during this session. So you say again, so that's a quick checklist, a bit of a more detailed one here. And do remember, all these, this recording of this session is going to be on the Rebuilding Heritage website, so you can come back to these checklists, you can come back to the commentary that I'm giving with it, but also do remember, if you said, oh, I can't answer that question, that might be a chance for you booking one of those one-to-one sessions. There's lots of reasons why you might book a one-to-one. If in doubt, apply for it, and I'm sure we'll spend some valuable time helping you move forward with your funding. So I'm not going to go through all of these points one by one, otherwise we'll never get any chance for your questions or to cover the rest of it. But that's a great checklist. So just think, can we answer these? These are all the internal research and gathering of information, so that later on you can use it almost as a pick and mix when you're completing a funding application, or whether you're perhaps writing a proposal, whether that's to a company or whether that's to any sort of other, possibly a major donor, or potentially to a funding body, a grant-making trust or foundation or other grant-making organisation. So internally, we need to understand all of these things and have answers, and then where it's appropriate, use them when we are completing it. So just thinking about completing those applications, again, I've got a couple of quick checklists for you here, but I've got 10 reasons why applications aren't as successful. So again, first of all, the check you're eligible. And again, I'm going to come back to a quick example of that a little bit later on. But have you got a well-planned project? Are you presenting your information clearly and concisely? Failure to demonstrate you meet the funders' criteria. So make it obvious to them. Include words like, having read your grant criteria. Gosh, I can't say that very clearly this morning. But having read your grant criteria, we feel we meet it in these ways. Just think of the similarities between applying for a job and applying for funding. You need to stress some things that meet the organisation's job description. You don't tell them lies, but you perhaps leave out some things that, oh, I'm not very good at Excel spreadsheets or whatever. There's another bit of within a job description. So what you want to do is mirror what they're looking for in the information that you tell them. Again, I'm going to share some more tips on that. But just check your budget. So often that's a quick way that many funders, that's their first sift. They look at your budget and say, is this realistic? Can they do what they're looking for this amount of money? Sometimes they think it's too little. You're saying, oh, we can do all this work, for a certain figure. But sometimes they think, my goodness, is it going to be gold plated, everything that they're intending to do? So just have a look at your budget and what other financial management procedures you have. remember the deadlines, and remember the deadline is 11 o'clock next Tuesday for the Rebuilding Heritage programme. And many funders cannot consider applications post a specific deadline. So, and just think of a deadline as an absolute deadline. Don't think of it as a target. Far better if you actually submit something earlier. There's sometimes chance then for assessors to look at it early. It gets a better read. They've chance sometimes then to come back to you, say, we've read your application, we're really interested in what you do, but we've just got a couple of quick questions, or we're not clear about. But if you submit right on the deadline, they don't necessarily have that time, because they're into that sort of process of going through all the applications. But if you submit early, you're doing yourself a favour. And think about that in terms of the Rebuilding Heritage programme. Think, yes, the deadline is 11 o'clock next Tuesday, but wouldn't it be awful if your computer crashed or your Wi-Fi link went and you've not got a Costa coffee that you could nick down to and use their free Wi-Fi? Far better, get it in by the end of the week. Set that as your deadline. Gives you a little bit of contingency if something crops up and it ends up being Monday morning instead. So just think about all those things, and hopefully there's a range of helpful tips there. And conversely here, we've got 10 reasons why applications are successful. And the first one, you can't get. This is a programme that's funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. But there was always a nice sort of bit of a slogan with the lottery. You've got to be in it to win it. And the same thing, if you don't make an application, you're not going to be successful. So you have to make an application where there is one to submit. So I know it sounds a bit twee, but I just wanted to put that in. It makes sense, but you've got to be in it to win it. So bear that one in mind. But only apply for funding where you think, I would always say, if you score a 0 or a 0 when you look at the criteria, then just don't bother. But then if you're a 2, possibly it's not your first priority, but definitely think about it. And anyone who's on the call today and listening to this presentation, part of the session, you will all qualify for the Rebuilding Heritage Fund. So why you need, explaining the need is so important first. Before you think about asking for money. So you need to say, why are we doing this? Some of you might have either children yourself at that stage, or grandchildren, or again, friends with children at that toddler stage, who constantly saying, but why? But why? So keep asking yourself, why are we doing this? Why do we need money? Needing money because you've not got money is not this. You want to solve something, you want to change something, you've got an issue, a problem, and that is what the money will enable you to do. So don't think your problem is that you've not got money. You've got something, a situation, and again, I'm going to come on to some examples to help that make a little bit more sense. But why is explaining the need first fundamental to raising more money? Well, a couple of answers to that rhetorical question. People and organisations are more likely to give, and the key one is give generously, when their connection to the cause is evoked. The problem or the issue that you're tackling is urgent, or it's serious, or your organisation's solution solves the problem. That is absolutely basic when you are looking to raise money. And the second one that I wanted to share with you now is they trust you enough. So whilst sometimes the questions that funders put in their forms or include on their website, and you think, why do they want to know that? They're just wanting to get a picture of you. They're wanting to understand, and they're wanting, it's a risk supporting any organisation. So they want to perhaps check who are your trustees. So they want to know how you're being managed, who are the people responsible at the end of the day. So it's all about that trust issue. So how do we convince them? Well, we use what is described as a case for support. Now, I'm aware, and what I often say, we need to be as jargon-free as possible. So some of you might say, well, Jill, that's a fundraising jargon term. But break it down. It's the case for why someone or something, an organisation, should support you. So it's building up our case as why we need support and what a funder or donor's money will actually do. So again, going back to the what's and whys, what do you do? Why do you do it? But why should the funders support you? So again, some clear things to help focus you about those important things. So a good starting point, I don't know if we've got any medical museums on the call today. Who perhaps, I remember going up to a medical museum up in Leeds a little while ago, definitely before COVID, but we'd definitely see one of these skeletons there. Hopefully, though, perhaps some of you got tales of haunted houses, perhaps the skeletons walking through your corridors down your staircase. But let's just think about this scenario. A good starting point, you say, is to think of a skeleton being your key component. So we've got the skull, we've got the rib cage, we've got those femurs, we've got some key elements. And then what we need to do is flesh it out by thinking about the questions a potential donor or supporter would want to ask or would need to know before making a decision to support you. So remember those questions that we had earlier. Let's go back to those and say, are we able to answer those? And incorporating this into our answers or into that freestyle proposal, what we write to actually convince, put forward our case for why an organisation or an individual should actually support us. Again, in the influential fundraiser, Bernard Ross and Claire Siegel, they give 5 key questions that a good case needs to enable the reader or the listener. Again, you might be thinking of what you say if you're meeting a potential donor. So what is the need? How can you tell this is a pressing need? How is your organisation best placed to tackle the situation? What will be the benefits of the work that you're going to do? So in a way, key question, they're all very key, but key question 4 is basically tell me, if I'm the potential funder, what will my money actually achieve? Because think of it as someone investing in you. So they want to see some action, some results, an outcome. So don't just say we're a good cause, give us your cash. That's just not going to convince anyone to support you. So these are some questions, and again, remember, you can get all this recording with all the slides and the information, so you can make a note of these and use them as some key things to help you develop your argument, whether it's written or whether it is going to be a verbal one. And what are the negative consequences if you fail? And that almost sounds the blackmail one, but again, I'm going to use that as an example when we come onto something in a few minutes' time. So just think about what I'm calling the negative consequences, or what I often refer to as the blackmail. But I don't ever want us to feel that we are blackmailing someone. If you don't do this, we're going to close. But again, sometimes we need to explain what are the consequences. If we don't take this action, what will the situation be? Because that sometimes helps convince that donor or the funder that the help is really urgent. It can't be put off till next year or the year after. Goodness, they need to do this by the year end. They need to do this by the autumn. So again, that might be part of convincing a potential supporter that they need to get on board. So when you're looking at all of these things and thinking, what is it that we do? This is one of my big tips, is think about the so what factor. So the roof is in a bad state and leaks. You might be writing that. Somebody, I'm sure there's somebody out there who said, yes, Jill, that's me. That's our organisation. Or I've just written that in a funding application. But if you put a full stop after that, the roof is in a bad state and leaks, full stop. This is why we need your help. We've not gone far enough. I really like to drill down and help you to say, well, would that convince you? So just keep saying to yourself, when you've perhaps, you've thought about a statement, as in the roof leaks, or in the next one, 80% of our staff have been furloughed for long periods of time. So what? It means they're disconnected. They don't know what's going on. We need to go on. We need to drill down, and we need to explain. We're preserving a 50-year-old building, sorry, a 500-year-old building. So what? We've had new visitors on site. So what? Some of you might say, it's that famous thing, this job would be great if it wasn't for the visitors. I often think sometimes, when I used to go shopping pre-COVID times, and you got 2 shop assistants, they were busy chatting to each other. They think, yeah, this job would be great if it wasn't for the customers. But you wouldn't exist without those customers out there. And again, what does that mean? Some might say, no visitors on site. It could be positive because you might be trying to preserve a 500-year-old building, and all this footfall is actually wearing away some key things. The handrail on the staircase is failing. So it's actually better if we don't have too many visitors on site. Is this negative? Is it positive? So again, keep asking yourself the so what. And we're going to come back. That's going to be my example. We're going to come back to the bad state of the roof and the leaks to explain this a bit more. So this is it. When we're explaining it, so what? So we can see this particular problem for a number of different angles. And that's what I said right at the start. Do you remember my little slide and that image of trying to chip off a bit to make that square peg fit into the round hole? Sometimes we say, what you just need to do is, rather than be tunnel vision, this is what we do, this is how we do it. Sometimes look at things from different angles. Well, your roof is in a bad state and it leaks. Well, that might mean it's causing further deterioration to the roof trusses, which themselves are 500 years old and already showing signs of rot. It might be underneath that roof, you've got an incredible wall painting that then might be lost forever or damaged. And to then have to repair that is going to cost you more money. So it might be it's a cost effective. It might be there's no great big hole. When I was looking for a slide, an image to put on this slide, I found some with great big gigantic holes in the roof. And I thought, no, that's when it's sometimes gone too far. And so you might say, Jill, we've got tarpaulin on our roof at the moment because we have got that gigantic hole. But for some, you might say, we've got a problem with our roof and we want to tackle it now because we've had some estimates. And at this stage, it will cost us $100,000 to repair it. But with the weather and the conditions, if this continues to deteriorate, if we only are able to get the funding together and do it next year, we're looking at doubling that bill. And in the meantime, that precious, rare wall painting then might have been damaged. And then we'll be looking at specialists having to come in to repair that, to restore that. So that might be part of what you convince people, put as your case over. So do you remember I said about the blackmail element, but what are the elements that convince? What will be the negative consequences of not doing this now? So that helps get across the urgency. And one is that it might cause further deterioration. Another, it may be that you have to stop visitors coming into this area. It may be this is, going to cause health and safety issues with water on the floor or mold that's growing. It could be, though, this is your, and again, I know some of you are really excited. You've got weddings started again. I personally am going to an outside wedding on Sunday, the weekend. It's really exciting. It's a wedding that was delayed from last year, but they were being very cautious. It's all outside, but we're very worried about the weather. We're seeing thunder and lightning over Suffolk this coming weekend, but it's going to be fine. We'll be fine. But again, it might be this, the roof is leaking over your main event area. So if you don't repair it, you won't be able to restart those face-to-face in-person events, which then generate you money, which are a key part of your financial strategy, which is about your long-term sustainability. So you see where we're going with this. But also then think about your funder. So you say you've got things like the Historic Houses Trust. Well, to be honest, they just want to know this building. Let's just imagine you're a historic house with your bit of blue tarpaulin ready to go up because your roof is in a bad state and it leaks. They really want to help with the structure of a historic house. But in their conditions, their criteria, they want to help rural buildings. So if you're a city centre, well, cracking, you can't go there. So again, read those criteria. But then if you fit the criteria, make sure you say in that case for support. that application that you're using all the information you're gathering together. Stress the rural nature of where you're based, the population, the site that you sit on. But then you say you've got AIM and their grants, and that's the Association for Independent Museums. They want now, it may be your roof is in a bad state of repair, and that valuable and that rare wall painting is already deteriorating. They want specialist conservators to come in. That's what they love to fund. That's important to them. They don't just want some jobbing painter. I've got someone painting my window frames, and whilst Justin is wonderful and he's doing a great job of my window frames, but he's not going to come and repair that wall mural that was done in the 15th century. So again, they're wanting to ensure, they want a feasibility undertaking to ensure, so they will fund it. They want to make sure, even if you've had something done before, they want to ensure that it fulfills their criteria. Apply for funding, that they will be able to then carry on and go to the next stage. So just think about the angle that you're going at, and think about the so what, and think about the consequences of what actually is happening. So look at it from the different angles is one of my big tips to share with you. Don't just be tunnel vision, be creative in terms of think about the angles, who you're approaching, and what is their particular interest and motivation. So just think about the features, the feature being the repairs to the roof, the benefit, and the benefit may be that you can, enable members of the public to come into this rare part of your building. It might mean you can start your events and generate income. It may mean it protects other things. So think about the features, but we need to expand it into the benefits, because the features are helpful, but the benefits helps convince a potential donor or supporter that they should get involved. So think about what is the current state. So think about this blue circle. That's where I think this is where something's not ideal. So just keep going back to my roof example. So, the roof is leaking and the consequences of that. What is going to be the future state? So that are the two key elements that we need to get across in any fundraising message. What is the current state? Because that convinces a donor, but also they want to get excited about being part of the solution. So we want to share the difference it's going to make and how they can get involved in being part of that. Quite often it's by giving you some cash to enable that to happen. But just think cash means results. So don't just stop, we need money to do this, or in order to make these changes, you can become involved. And so I'm going to share some more quick tips with you from that angle. So you say, just think about what will have changed as a result of the funding or the support that someone gives you. And that's where sometimes a story can actually help to illustrate your impact. It's about making it real and adding the human element to something. So you say telling a story also helps capture people's imagination. It makes it memorable. It gets across some of the complex issues by putting it together in a story. Sometimes even just an image can also help as that. And I'm sure all sorts of things are being thought about by that picture. And thinking about perhaps some school visits and some dressing up sessions. I love that little girl in the middle with her Viking helmet on. So, stories, you say, are tuned in, our DNA is tuned in to hearing stories. So it's a great technique. I know you can't always with an actual application form where you've got set questions to answer, but where you can use a quote for an example, but where you can think about a story. And we've all sorts of stories to share. We might have stories about our founder, stories about someone who's visited us, someone who's been a lifetime member of our organisation, someone who's a volunteer, someone who's perhaps that specialist conservator doing that work on restoring perhaps some precious wall mural that you've got. So let me use again another quick example. I mentioned just in passing before that I'm actually physically based in Suffolk. I travel very widely normally, but I work across the whole of the UK and into Europe and beyond. But you say, I love the story of Sutton Hoo. And when I first moved to Suffolk many, many years ago, it was one of the places that really sort of did inspire me. And I think it's a great story. Because stories bring together, you might just say there was some mounds. I know many of you will be familiar with the story of Sutton Hoo. And if you're not, you say Netflix has turned the book about Sutton Hoo called The Dig into a film. But it brings it alive, but lets you focus on different elements of the project, dependent on the funder's interest. So you can share stories around different parts of it. So this might be an element some of you would immediately think of if you're thinking about Sutton Hoo, the burial ground of kings, and that mask and a range of the artifacts that were found at this burial site are now in the British Museum. And for some of you, that is an important part. And for some funders, it was about finding those artifacts, but there's a range of stories. So again, this is literally a clip, a photo from an image from the Netflix film called The Dig. But there was a lovely story about Edith Pretty. She's the lady at the foreground of this image, but I remember a lovely National Trust volunteer on the first time I did a guided tour. And she explained about how Edith Pretty used to stand at her bedroom window and look out across the grounds and see these raised mounds. And on some nights, she would see ghostly figures above it. So this could be a horror story, a ghost story, but my interest was already captured by that volunteer. But for some of you, and for some funders, it is about the ship that was buried underneath these mounds, because it was a burial ground. And where did that ship come from? Who sailed in it? And who was the person buried? How did it get to the top of the hill? But it sailed up the River Devon. So again, there's a bit of geography there. And there's a bit of where did the ship come from? And so that might be because it's history and it's of the era that someone's wanting to help preserve and share, not just with the people of Suffolk, but with the people of the whole of the UK and wider, because I say many times when I go there. And I'm planning to go next week. My parents are visiting and we're actually off there either Monday or Tuesday next week. But they say it's about, you know, wanting to preserve something, to find out more, to share what actually happened hundreds of years ago at that site. Before I showed you a quick image of that helmet and that buckle. So the artifacts. So who was King Radwald? Obviously somebody incredibly wealthy. He was the king over this part of the UK all those centuries ago. So that's another interesting story that we could pick up on. But also there'll be a funder who's interested in preserving those artifacts and about making them available for people to see. And if you did or have already visited, know the story and have watched the film, but Ipswich Museum was desperate to hold these, but in the end, Edith Pretty felt she wanted these to have a wider audience. And so in the end, she donated them. And she did, she donated them because at one stage they thought they were going to have to get a shed load of money so they could buy them from her. But the wonderful generosity of Edith Pretty has meant that these artifacts are there in the British Museum for many people to go and see. But then you might have a funder. Well, that's all very interesting, but this is about Suffolk. And we only fund organisations and work that's about Suffolk. So again, whilst we've got some lovely stories, but we want to share how this is a project that's rooted very much in the Suffolk countryside. How it can perhaps help the economic regeneration. It's just outside Woodbridge, so many visitors who go there will then go into Woodbridge. So perhaps they'll stop shopping online and go and visit Woodbridge High Street. And so it's about tourism and about sustainability of an area. So this is it. Just think about the angles and the stories that we can share to make it memorable and to convince people and help them understand what it is that you're trying to achieve and how they can actually get involved. And really what we're talking about here is bringing in an element of reason, but also an element of emotion. Because I often talk about the head and the heart test. And we need to get a balance between head and heart. Hope you like that little diagram, infographic there. But the decision to give is often made in an emotional place, not necessarily a logical one. So yes, we need to convince donors, and they're thinking, yeah. And I always think that on the verge, using the head, they're on the verge of wanting to support you, and just to push them over. If you watch that program Tipping Point, or remember going to slot machines, those amusement arcades as a child, or perhaps you still go with children and grandchildren, it's right on the edge, and they're almost there. I think, yeah, this sounds good, it fits our criteria, but they've got a range of applications, but they can only support the last 2, and they've got 10 to choose from. So sometimes it's that little bit of emotion that actually helps push them over. So we've just got 10 minutes left. I'm watching the clock, as I say, so start thinking about the questions. Don't start filling in your application yet to get some more help and support from me or the other consultants that are part of the Rebuilding Heritage programme, but be thinking, write it on your post-it to be thinking about doing that once we finish. But I've got a range of final hints and tips I want to share with you, and that might generate some questions and some points that you either want to ask in this session, but remember, we've only got half an hour for questions, so you might want to apply and get booked in for a one-to-one session as well. So is that some final hints and tips that are going to increase your success rate. So first one, research and understand your funder as much as possible. Sometimes their founding story might be the thing that you quote back to them. And again, there's a lovely trust that's based up in Scotland. And when you go onto their website, the chair of trustees talks about how they were founded by 3 sisters. Their father left them a distillery and they wanted to do some good. So whether they sold it, I'm not quite sure, but it's a lovely story. But these 3 ladies then, and the only sport organisations in Scotland, and I know I've actually pointed it out to several people who've actually gone on to apply or already been successful there. So research and understand your funder, what they can do, because sometimes they have got a legal straitjacket. Many funders themselves are registered charities, and so their criteria reflects their founding document, their constitution, their governance. So whilst they might think, yeah, this sounds good, but legally they can't actually do it. So demonstrate, you say, that the use of funds will be valuable and that you consulted widely. And this is something that many funders worry about, is this sounds good, it sounds like you've got a good idea, but how do you know? Will the area embrace this? Will your current people who are using your facilities or visiting you or however you're running your services, is it something that they will use? Because I told you I've got lots of, sorry, wrong slide. I've got lots of animal examples here, but you remember that thing about a white elephant? We don't want to do all this and no one wants to use it. Does it solve the problem, but do people want to get involved with it? So remember, consult widely and demonstrate that users want to be part of the solution and will get involved, and it is something that won't just become a white elephant. So make them want to read it. Now, I know many nowadays are receiving electronic applications, so just think of this as they're either disappearing under a pile of application forms or electronic application forms. So we've got to make this application, this proposal that you're perhaps writing and going to submit for someone to read, we've got to make it interesting. So let's not bore the reader. So just think about the things that you're saying, the things you're sharing. Sometimes when I do some assessment work as well, and when I look at it, I sometimes think, well, they've got all the information, but it didn't capture my interest. So just think about how you open it, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So tell them what they need to know, not what you want to tell them. So often we just cut and paste things, or just, we've got this standard thing that we send round. Just go back to this. Sometimes you're asking someone or an organisation, you might say, well, we're not asking for a lot of money, but if it's £1,000, they want to know that you're asking them, not that you're asking lots of organisations for £1,000, that you've tailored this application or what you're sharing with them, specifically to them. And that again makes them feel much warmer to you and starts thinking, crikey, one of my key phrases I often use, if you can demonstrate that you're raising your money professionally, it gives confidence that you'll then spend the funder's money professionally. So make sure you tell them things they need to know, not just things that you've cut and pasted from a report that went to the trustees or it's on your website. Yeah, you might reflect some of that language, but sometimes reflect the tone as well and the language of your funder. And remember, you know, long words and long sentences and jargon and technical language, just think of those as the speed bumps that really slow down or put a reader, an assessor off. So they may be things that are just slowing you down from securing that support. But do spark the funder's interest. Think about how you're opening. Now, I'm not wanting to turn you all into tabloid headline writers, but you know, you need to grab people's attention, because just remember, even though you're applying to an organisation, it's actually real people who will be reading this. So it might be the title, it might be an image, it might be a quote, it might be a case story, it might be that story that you're going to tell. And where you can, make it visually interesting. I hope you found that slide visually interesting. So this is it. Just think, you know, what are you going to do to grab that attention early on? Because, crikey, I know there's been other sessions that have particularly sort of focused on communication, so I'm not going to go over all of that. But just think, this is literally, it's lifted out. Some things have been changed to protect the innocent here, but this is lifted out of a real application. And I tell you what, it was a bit boring. And you say, did I get to the end? Well, I did, to that end of where, you know, after educators, the full stop is, but I was shouting. Yes, but what do you actually do and why? So many people would not have been as diligent as I was when I was reading that. So again, you know, go to the Rebuild and Heritage website. There's lots of the webinars and different resources there. So again, you know, I'm not going to give you more tips now about this, about grabbing attention and the communication there. But, you know, have a look at some of those other sessions because it's all part of this program that's designed to help you. So you say, do remember about that storytelling, because you say, just to really convince you, you say they give evidence of the need and the problem and the solution. They make it memorable. You say they simplify things, but they also help people to think. And I'm doing this because I'm doing my heart. I'm thinking about that head and heart test. So share what you achieve, not what you actually do. Sometimes we go into what I describe as estate agent detail. Remember that chart I showed you before, that slide, and it showed the blue circle, current state, and then, you know, the proposed state in the green circle, and the transformation. Sometimes how you're going to deliver a project doesn't actually excite people, but what is the end point? That's the thing that is going to excite someone. And stop doing what I call being pig in the middle. Remove as many us and we, and replace with you and your when you're able to. So let's just have a think about that. So we're trying to make them feel part of it. There's some sort of subtle psychology going on here. So which works better? Please give us £20,000 and we'll do something incredible with it. Or your £20,000 grant will mean that teenagers like Ruth can really understand some of the history that is behind Suffolk and what happened in centuries gone by and the treasures that have been buried under the earth here, if we're thinking about that Sutton Hoo example. Now, I've got a bit of a wicked sense of humour for those of you who know me. So I've got a joke that's almost going to wrap us up. So I know you can't answer me this, but I'm just going to ask you rhetorically, what's the difference between a camel and that thoroughbred horse? And so often our applications are camels and we want them to be thoroughbred horses. Because the difference between a camel and a thoroughbred horse is that a camel is a thoroughbred horse that's been designed by a committee. And just think of it. So often when you read, and I told you I read many applications, besides being a fundraising consultant, I also help funders as well. And sometimes I could almost get a marker pen out. I don't know if you can see on the screen, but I've got a number of different coloured marker pens here. And sometimes I think, yeah, that's the pink person. And the tone, the style is that. And then all of a sudden I'm with my yellow marker pen because I think that's somebody else. Somebody else is sharing something. So sometimes it's the language, sometimes it's the tone, sometimes it's the tense. Sometimes somebody coming at it from first person, some are coming at it from third person. So just when you're doing a final proofread, you need to look at a proofread from many angles when you're doing, you've got your information together. You might ask someone to say, have I described the project appropriately? You might have used some language and terms that reflect the funders, so don't get people to change words. But you might say to someone, have I got the grammar and the punctuation correct? So you might give that as a brief. But give somebody else a brief. Does it flow? Does it sound like it is coming from the same person, the same voice? Is the style the same? So remember that. You don't want to be submitting camels, you want to be submitting applications that are like thoroughbred horses. And I told you we've got lots of animals. So my final animal to share with you here is that round robin. So don't just send a round robin. Don't just send that same application to everyone. Stay focused. Is this really the project you want to do? And if you send a round robin, you're just telling the same story, the same things to everybody. Don't just go chasing the money. Stay focused and think about what your project is all about, who it's with, what it can achieve, and think about that from those different angles. So remember, it's all that. Don't just go chasing the money. To be sustainable in the long term, you need to be needs-led, not funding-driven. So remember some final things. I'm not going to go through these because I definitely want to make sure we're open to the questions. So again, go back to the website later. This presentation and all the slides will be uploaded. So think about what funders are actually looking for. And don't be like this gentleman with his head in his hands, thinking about some of those common mistakes that people make when trying to secure funding. So again, that's just a quick checklist just to help keep you focused. So it's thank you and goodbye. No, it's not, but thank you for listening to that. And in half an hour, we'll be saying goodbye and good luck. But before we do that, as we advertised, there was an hour's session, and now we're going to move on to that time for questions. So Sarah's just joined me, so I'm going to stop the screen share. There we are, just a quick last one. Remember, I'm sure you all know the website, and again, use the hashtag if you're putting anything out on Twitter, hashtag Rebuilding Heritage, and remember, that is the website that you need to go to find the information, to link to the application form, to actually get in your application for the round 6, the final round of the Rebuilding Heritage programme. It's closing next week, and that will be delivered. You will then access the support during September and October. So, Sarah, what questions have we got coming in?
So we have questions that were submitted in advance, as well as questions coming in live, and I'll be doing a mix of both, Jill. So one that's come in live while you were giving your presentation. You mentioned earlier how important it is to manage expectations internally. Can you offer some advice, some kind of strategies and suggestions for how to manage potentially unrealistic expectations? And this person here is particularly keen to understand how they can communicate with their trustees and keep their expectations realistic about the funding landscape and the chances of success.
Great, it's a really good one to kick us off, Sarah. And also it goes back to that slide, and maybe this person wasn't there then anyway, but just go back to that slide. You say I like images as memory hooks, and think about that guy with the A board on him, and it said, if you ask me, I'll give you a fiver, words to that effect. And I do think many organisations, people in organisations who are not involved in fundraising, just think, oh, there's these funders, there's trust foundations, there's these other grant bodies, they just exist to give money away. just, for goodness sake, just apply to them. But it's about explaining that there is a process, and just explain, perhaps use my thing about the hand in glove, and when you're looking, you're going to assess. And there's another expression thinking about the animals, you know, you've got to kiss many frogs before you find your prince, or whatever. And sometimes, yes, you might score them, you might do some research, but you have to do some research. You've to talk to other organisations similar to you, you've to use some directories, you've got to find out funders, and then you've got to read their information that they're sharing very carefully. Then try and grade it, and share the process then with people. It's not just, oh, here's an application. Oh gosh, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, just put an application in. Explain to them that they have a criteria. Again, explain some are registered charities, and they, like if you're a registered charity as your organisation, that there's things you can do and things you can't do. So example, you know, I was sharing before about Southwold, not about Southwold, sorry, about Sutton Hoo, which is near Woodbridge. But that fits in with Adnams, the brewery. Many of you out there might have drunk a pint of beer, or some of that they distill. They've got a lovely gin as well. But they have a funding pot which will only support organisations that are based within a 25-mile radius. Because they're based in Southwold on the coast, that's the not a 360-degree radius. So again, share with them how they work, how they operate, and say, yes, you know, think about quality, not quantity. We're going to really fine tune, but we still won't be successful. And again, try to understand, and the grant making environment, it depends whether you've got a previous relationship with a funder. Sometimes you're more successful. Some organisations find they're more successful with a form than a freestyle, and vice versa with others. But try and work out what your strike rate is. And a current strike rate, there's talk with just across the board of filling in applications, it's somewhere between a 1 in 9 and a 1 in 12. So for every application that's made, you're only going to be successful every 9th or 12th application. So that's just a standard, but again, I've not got any detailed figures. The research hasn't been done about heritage organisations and heritage funders. But again, just share, no matter what we do. And it's not just a case of, let's just throw out. And again, so many times I've heard somebody say, oh, we did 80 applications. I did them overnight. You know, I started at 6 in the evening and I finished 2 in the morning. I've sent them all out. And I've only had one that gave me, 20 quid. What was the point? Because you did a round robin. So again, it's about managing expectations. This needs time. Think of it as a project. No one would sort of decide to set up an education project at Sutton Hoo. Let's carry on with that. They didn't just, do that one afternoon and the following day have 1,000 children come on site. It's a project, and it needs a project plan, and it needs time for different stages. So if you share that, then hopefully that will help in terms of managing expectations. But also everyone's got to get involved, because one person can't magic up all the information. So again, people need to make time to supply the person who is, I know not everyone's the official fundraiser, but you're in the role of a fundraiser when you're looking for money. But other people need to make time to share that information. So again, in terms of managing expectations, if people don't make time and share information, then you can't do a good quality application.
I think it's a really good point, Jill. I loved your suggestion earlier that people score available funds based on how they meet the criteria, because that gives you a really good line of defense when you're being potentially encouraged to put in more and more applications, to be able to say, actually, these are the ones that we're going to target because we think we have a higher chance of success. And actually some sort of some record keeping involved here, which is keep a record of the applications you've done and where you've been successful and where you haven't, so that you can demonstrate to your trustees what you've been working on. And also, the more you were talking about the strike rate, the 1 in 9, you could actually keep a record of your organisation's own particular strike rate, and you might be able to start to see patterns of we're actually more successful when we go for applications within a specific regional criteria, or we're more successful if we're going for educational charities and trusts. So I think these are great strategies for organisations to be thinking about, so that it's not just this kind of scattergun approach to fundraising. Fantastic, Jill, thank you so much. It also, I think it kind of ties in with a couple of questions that came in advance around the importance of setting these boundaries within our work. Something that came up in the questions before, which also occurred kind of throughout you were talking about the kind of criteria and the remits that funders have. What do you do, Jill, in a scenario where you've read the guidance documents, you have some questions around those requirements and those remits? How would you suggest approaching a funder for clarification?
Yeah, that's a good one. And many funders are really, really open to actually having inquiries beforehand. Some, just think back to my scenario, my analogy about applying for a job. Again, I do some recruitment as well, but I'm often, for an informal discussion before applying, ring and you say my details will be published. And I always think people are daft if they don't take advantage of that, because there's that great opportunity to pick someone's brains, to plant some seeds as well. It's a great way to start a relationship. Do you remember the 3 R's I shared before? So relationships was one of them. And I talked about pre and post application relationships. So just as if you're applying for a job, make contact before if you're able to. Some just occasionally it will say we're not available or we're not able to share any information or answer any calls. But do, first of all, check a website if they've got one. Check the information, because that's where, again, just swap the shoes. Imagine someone rings you, you've got an appointment, you ring up, and they ask you something to say, well, actually, that question's on our website. So make sure you've read all the information. And then you can then say, and I'm a great believer, we don't use the phone enough, we hide behind emails, but never expect someone just to pick up the phone and answer your question. Say, I really wanted just to talk to you about some of the points on your website to clarify, so I'm not wasting your time by putting in an inappropriate application. When could we have that conversation, or possibly even email? But sometimes people are busy and don't answer emails. So, but don't necessarily think you're cold calling and then expect them. So I always ask for permission and check. And then I will use language like, I notice you say, so it proves I've looked at a website, but I'm just not sure. Can I clarify? This is what we're looking for funding for. Would you interpret that as fulfilling your criteria? So you're actually then sharing with them. Also, another quick tip, again, I share some tips because I've fallen foul of that. And I've sometimes said, is that something that would interest you? Just again, think about the person that you're talking to. And I might have asked that, and I definitely know I have, because then I've got a refusal pretty quick. And I thought they said it would interest them. And I've almost got by return post or a return email a no. It may be the person I'm talking to isn't a decision maker. So again, think about your language when you're talking to someone. Say, is this something that would be successful? Is this something that the trustees would consider? Don't just assume that the person you're talking to is a decision maker. Again, you might be asking, is this the sort of thing that's been successful in the past for being awarded funding? So again, think about the language around that. So make sure you've read anything that's available and then make reference to that, because it shows you've done your homework. And that's flattering. You say, oh yeah, I've got a great website, and you ticked off 80% of my questions. Is it okay just have a few minutes of you when it's convenient just to ask about the other 20%? And that is then flattering to them.
And I think, and that just from my perspective, I would say also check through their website whether they have a preferred mechanism for taking questions and clarifications. Because, for example, Rebuilding Heritage is not a grant giving programme, but we do offer training and consultancy. We run intro to sessions. In fact, we're running one this afternoon. I'll pop the link to the booking in the chat. So if people wanted to come along and ask questions, this is one of the mechanisms that we offer, and we have it advertised on our website. So check your funder's website. They might say we run info sessions, or we prefer to receive phone calls, or please email us, and choose the mechanism that they have requested.
Oh, absolutely. Again, obviously you yourself, through the Rebuild and Heritage, and it's great, some people might want to join that, and it's great you put the link there in the chat. And again, Meet the Funder, there's lots of Meet the Funder sessions. And at the Chartered Institute of Fundraising, it's a national organisation, covers the whole of the UK. And again, we've got regional groups, and I'm chair of the East Anglian group. So I keep telling you, I'm based in Suffolk, but I say it work widely across the country. But there's regional groups and there's special interest groups. And again, people don't need to be a member to register for information. And we sometimes do, in East Anglia, we try and run connection events. We're doing everything virtual at the moment. And sometimes it's easier to get funders to join us. And I was on a panel myself with 3 other funders only probably 6 weeks ago. And so just look out for these things. There's lots and lots of free sessions. Sometimes even there's a small fee, but sometimes you think, well, I'm going to get an awful lot of help and advice, lots of tips out of this, and I'll hear it, dare I say, from the horse's mouth. I'm continuing my animal analogies. Yeah, so watch out for any Meet the Funder sessions, and again, go to the Chartered Institute of Fundraising website, register for some of their things. There's lots of free sessions, and there's some that are fairly low fees as well.
And on that note about kind of, there's the Meet the Funders, but that's once you've already identified the funders that you are considering approaching. Do you have any tips for people, Jill, on how they can identify suitable funders for their organisation?
Again, a really good question, but there is a mine of information out there. So yeah, let me give some tips then to help sort of focus people's minds on this. But never think of just purely one source. It's like if you're looking for a house, Rightmove is pretty good, but there's other things that don't happen there. So there's a range of different funding websites. Charity Excellence has got a free one where you can sort of find out. The Heritage Alliance, there's the Heritage Funding Directory, is an absolute wonderful source of information. But again, so there's a range of websites and directories that you can tap into. Again, some of them are free, some are paid for. The Directory of Social Change does funds online, which again, I know some people might subscribe to, but that's a subscription. But again, think about where possibly somebody else has got that information. So every different areas around the country, they've got what are known as CVSs, or community voluntary service organisations, or they sometimes change the name to community actions. They sometimes have access, they're a third tier organisation helping support voluntary and not-for-profit organisations very often. And so they will know of local funders, but also they subscribe to some of these websites. So you do it through them. Local authorities, again, in my local authority, Suffolk County Council, there's a great guy, and he's a funding advisor. And again, I meet these, I do some training, not just with the Rebuild and Heritage Programme, with other things. And just only last week, I had one of these funding advisors came on a morning's training session with me. They know lots, but she was actually wanting to hear about things from charities and from organisations looking for funding, so she could be more effective doing her job. So again, in your local authority, try and find a funding advisor. Another thing, and don't be worried about you putting this information, I'm talking to the audience, not you, Sarah, about putting the information in your annual report, but lots of funders like to have acknowledgements in their annual report. So one of my sources of information is always to look at other similar charities, whether it's from a geographical perspective or from a cause perspective. Look at the impact report or an annual report, whatever the terminology is. Look at their website, because again, they often share information. So I hope that's given some tips. Many funders are also registered charities. So if you know the name, but obviously you need to know the name, stick it in the Charity Commission website on the search. And again, you can find out who the trustees are, how much they gave away last year. Again, their annual report, which some people might find it's really dull and boring to read, but my goodness, it's like being a detective, pulling together all these strands of information, and you can get so many sort of clues out of somebody else's charity's annual report that's on the Charity Commission. But, you know, why not talk to other people? Hopefully there's lots of people using the chat function to network. One of the best sources of information is fellow fundraisers. And you know what? We're a really friendly bunch of people. And if you're only just starting out in this area, welcome. We are a great bunch of people, and we love to share and help each other and try and share something back. But, you know, we'll try and help each other. It's all about, at the end of the day, we're all in it together, and we will share lots of information. So join local networks, join sector specific networks, and keep saying to people, where have you got funding from, or who's turned you down recently? And whilst we're just talking about that, if someone turns you down, try and find out why. But also from the other reason, when you are successful, you're definitely going to be starting a relationship, and just say, why did you decide to support us? And, you know, get tips from a funder who said yes. So, yeah, and they might say, oh my goodness, you know, that story you told, going back to my storytelling act, or my goodness, you know, the statistics, or, oh, we never realized the situation was as desperate as that. You know, you really convinced us, you know, with those stats that you shared. So again, you know, find out when you're successful. Also, that's my final point on where to find out information. So whenever I'm successful, I then ask a couple of questions to my funder. What do you need from me? When do you need it? What was it about our application or our proposal that you liked? Why did you decide? And my other one is, I say, who else do you think we should be approaching? So again, whilst I'm talking about fundraisers networks, funders themselves have got networks, and they themselves kind of say, well, have you approached such a body? Have you gone to AIM? Have you looked at the Historic Houses Trust, Foundation? And so again, they can sometimes, they say, they know who's doing similar things, or they themselves, they might have worked there last year, or their bestie works there, or is an advisor. Some trusts or grant makers have got advisors, and that's something I do. I sit behind a few different organisations. So again, they often know of other organisations you should be approaching.
So just worth mentioning here to our audience that the recording of this session will be made available on the Rebuilding Heritage website. So if you're hoping to be able to kind of go back and get that list that Jill has just verbally given to us, the recording will be available within a couple of weeks. So you'll be able to go through the webinar, re-watch any of the sections that you find useful, but also get to this Q&A section and get that list from Jill again in the recording. Jill, we can't get through the webinar without talking about COVID, unfortunately. So in a post-pandemic world, arts organisations, heritage organisations, cultural organisations may feel that they are low on the priority list for funders. Do you have any specific advice for how they can be more successful or proceed within this new fundraising context?
And this is really interesting. And it's something I've given a lot of thought to, and I've talked to a lot of funders, and I've talked to a lot of organisations and individuals trying to secure support. And yes, you're not providing nurses, you're not doing the frontline stuff. But I think, to be honest, we've moved out of that, where lots of funders were wanting to do the direct things. And I think one of the trends that is really, really high, and again, anyone who's, you know, read a newspaper, talked to anyone, you know, listen to the news, you know, health and well-being is absolutely, you know, high up there. And lots of people are really, you know, have this time cooped up and everything else. I think also people have reassessed values. What's important, you know, again, people have connected with their local communities in a way they previously didn't. And I've got something on my sort of windowsill, and it says, never be too busy making a living that you forget to make a life. And it's what is life? And I think, you know, I don't mean to be deep and philosophical and start a discussion in the 5-10 minutes we've got left, but I think people have reassessed, you know, what is important to them in life. And whilst, yes, you know, you might say, oh, well, we're not even doing anything about mental health and well-being. But again, talking to a funder and sharing, you know, the value of what you're offering to people in a community and how it's going to encourage them to meet other people, to understand more about a setting, but also from that health and well-being, feeling of belongingness is, you know, what roots us all. So again, understanding your history. So even though you don't think, crikey, you know, we're not Mind or whatever as a mental health charity, just think about what does your work do? What does the project that you're about to, you know, what are the benefits? You know, is this giving the children, you know, I got that lovely slide, and I told you I love that with those what they're about 5-6 year olds dressing up, but again, children have missed out on play. So whilst, you know, it may be a fundraiser saying, you know, post-pandemic we want to give opportunities, so whilst you're wanting to do something, it may be the way you're delivering your work, you could just slightly encourage more dressing up, more play activities within it to perhaps get a deeper engagement with children. And that then helps you actually reach the audience that you're intending, or helps you reach a wider audience. So think laterally about what you're doing, and does it help with some of the trends that are coming forward? But also, you know, just in trusts alone, grant making trusts in the UK, we've got round about 9,000. And I actually say there's something there for everyone. So whilst you might think we're not the sexiest cause at the moment, people and organisations that set up funding, they've got their own interests and their reason for existence. You know, the Historic Houses Foundation is there because he wants to preserve these old houses, because once they're gone forever. So again, target the organisations, but also just think about the work, think about the primary benefits, but think about some of the secondary benefits. And I'm sure we will fit into quite a few of the funding criteria that are coming out aimed at that post-pandemic, you know, sort of current needs situation.
So we are approaching the very end of the webinar session now. So Jill, my final question to you is going to be, you know, it was a brilliant presentation, huge amounts of information, lots of information for people to take on board. If nothing else, what one action should people leaving the webinar at the end of the session take next?
A good final question. And as you say, sometimes, and I know I rabbit hole because I'm trying to share so much with people in the short time that we've got together. So again, anyone listening, you might be fed up with me rabbiting away, but I'm sure, you know, there's things that I've helped organisations to think through being part of this programme ever since it started. So we've got one final round, you know, so do think about booking a one-to-one session on fundraising or the other areas that are being offered that might be useful. And we can explore your individual areas, your needs and requirements. But again, if there's one thing to take away from today, is what I encourage people. I'm gonna do two for the price of one. It's all the range in the supermarkets. Is stay focused, but also share information across your organisation and be like a magpie. Keep gathering things together. So share information and keep making sure you're receiving information. Gather it up like a magpie, put it into your nest, and then you've got it ready. You think, oh yeah, we want to do that. And whilst it might be something you were thinking about next year, you might be able to bring it forward because there's a new funding part. You say, yeah, we want to do this. So no one become precious with their plans, to keep being open and sharing. So, you know, gather information, put a team around you, but stay focused about what you're trying to do.
I think that's a really great idea. Somebody that I used to know who was a head of culture in a local authority had a great big binder, and anytime anybody threw out an idea for a project or, you know, something they needed but they couldn't afford or anything of that sort, she jotted it down, stuck it in this binder, and it meant that when she actually got to the point of making funding applications, she knew what the needs were, she knew what the ideas were, she didn't have to kind of suddenly generate a project, because there it was, this binder full of absolute gold dust of ideas and need. So I think that's a fantastic idea to leave people with, Jill, to kind of involve their teams, share those ideas. And the final thing for me to say, Jill, is thank you so much for your time today. Absolutely brilliant insight into how people can operate a needs-led funding strategy. And that's it from us today. We hope you found today's session useful. Thank you very much for attending and making this a priority in your day. And thank you once again to Jill for her fantastic thoughts and ideas for fundraising in the heritage sector. Please, everybody, do look out for a feedback form that will pop up after the session. It will also be emailed to you after the event. We really appreciate you taking the time to fill out the evaluation form. At this stage in the programme, it helps us to measure the impact of the Rebuilding Heritage programme, but it also helps us to inform the National Lottery Heritage Fund and others in the sector of what the needs still are going forward and what how those needs could be met once programmes like Rebuilding Heritage close. As I mentioned at the very beginning, and Jill has mentioned a few times throughout today's session, we are currently open for applications to the very final round of support on the programme, where you can apply for one-to-one fundraising support, but also other types of one-to-one consultancy and small group training sessions. The deadline for applications is 11 p.m. on the 27th of July, which is next Tuesday. It takes about 30 minutes to complete the application. And if you would like to know more, you can join us this afternoon in an Intro to Rebuilding Heritage session, which you can book onto via the website. We look forward to getting all of your applications in. And thank you very much and have a lovely rest of your day.
All the best. Hope to see some of you later. Bye.